business email compromise scores big in Central Europe. More SWIFT fraud and a security ultimatum from SWIFT to its members. Vanya the Ripper is on the lam from Thai police. iMessaging issues surface. Cerber ransomware is being spread by Word documents. Adobe's hotfix swats a cold fusion bug. Rowhammer attacks are shown to be a real possibility. Election hacking and influence operations, and a tip. If you look good for your mugshot, you won't be tempted to Facebook a more flattering one to the authorities. Time to take a moment to thank some sponsors. The Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute and Compass Cybersecurity are hosting the 3rd Annual Senior Executive Cybersecurity Conference on Wednesday, September 21st from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's going to be at the Homewood campus of Johns Hopkins University right here in Baltimore. Hear from industry leaders on cybersecurity best practices and trends that will help you better secure your organization's data. This year's agenda examines the current cybersecurity landscape, threats and challenges ahead for organizations, and how senior leaders can work towards shifting their data to being safe and secure. You can find out more online at secsc.compasscyber.com or on the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute website at isi.jhu.edu. Do check it out. And we thank the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute and Compass Cybersecurity for sponsoring our show. I'm Dave Bittner in Baltimore with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, September 1st, 2016. 2 revelations of fraudulent fund transfers lead cybercrime news. The first is a variant of the familiar yet still very dangerous business email compromise. In mid-August, German wire manufacturer Leoni AG lost roughly $44.6 million when personnel at a Romanian facility followed instructions in a spoofed email. The money apparently wound up in accounts in the Czech Republic. The incident is noteworthy because Leoni had a number of safeguards in place to prevent exactly this sort of loss, but the criminals had done their homework and crafted an email that not only appeared to be from an executive authorized to make such a request, but also gave every appearance of having passed through the company's policy and security gates. And SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, is back in the news. Earlier this year, the financial sector's International Funds Transfer Network witnessed fraud against member banks in Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Ecuador, with some of the attempts also touching German and U.S. banks. It has now, Reuters reports, again warned its members that more fraudulent money transfers have been observed and that some of them were successful. The scope of the latest attacks is unknown, but SWIFT has given its members an ultimatum: update to the latest version of SWIFT software by November 19th, or be reported to regulatory authorities and banking partners. Reuters says that weak local security was exploited to compromise local networks and then send bogus messages requesting money transfers, some of which were apparently filled. Such incidents offer a number of lessons, not the least of which are the importance of network segmentation and privileged account management. Commenting directly on the SWIFT disclosure and warning, Shane Stevens, Vasco Data Security's Director of Omnichannel Identity and Trust Solutions, told the CyberWire that, quote, SWIFT got a wake-up call finally for its decision to stay with passwords, end quote. Stevens noted that while SWIFT has worked to strengthen passwords, the password itself represents a dead-end line of development in 3 decades of authentication technology. He also commented that organizations like SWIFT present a large attack surface. Quote, with so many attack vectors, it was just a matter of time before SWIFT became a focal point for cyber criminals, end quote. He characterized the financial sector as more reactive than one would like to see them be. It seems that hardly a week goes by without news of a new or newly discovered data breach. We spoke with Centrify's Senior Director of Products, Corey Williams, about data breaches and his insights on the recent Sage Software data breach.
Well, Sage is an interesting company. They're one of the largest software companies in the UK with over 6 million small and medium-sized businesses, and they provide software for things like payroll and accounting and CRM. What we've heard so far about the Sage data breach is that it's affected the information related to somewhere in the neighborhood of 280, 300 of those individual businesses, although that number may change as it's very early on in the investigation. And allegedly, the breach was conducted using a Sage employee account. So it's not known whether this was indeed some sort of insider doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or whether it was some sort of outside attack that was leveraging a compromised employee account.
What are the ramifications of this breach?
Well, it's interesting. Sage has been on a tear lately. If you look at their stock price, it recently hit a 16-year high, and they've been performing very well in the market. Just the news alone has caused the share price to dip 4-5%, at last glance. And so, at a minimum, it's affecting the shareholders of Sage. But interestingly, there's probably longer-term ramifications. Centrify recently did a study with over 2,000 participants in the U.S. and U.K. Basically said that over 2/3 of the respondents of consumers are likely to stop doing business with organizations that have been breached. So potentially, the damage to this could last for a while.
And so what are some of the things that Sage could have done to protect themselves against this sort of thing?
Many of these data breach stories, and it appears that Sage is the same, it has to do with the misuse of someone's credentials. They're logging into systems they shouldn't have access to, whether they're an insider or they're a malicious outsider. So one of the first things you can do is immediately establish better what we call identity assurance. It's sort of the lowest hanging fruit to ensure that people are logging in as themselves. And passwords just aren't sufficient for that anymore. Our modern companies today are using multi-factor authentication everywhere that they can. And the nice thing about multi-factor authentication is a password by itself can't be used to compromise access. You actually have to have the user's device or some other fingerprint or so on. And so that's sort of the lowest hanging fruit, is to immediately use MFA everywhere. Now, what's interesting is that MFA hasn't been widely deployed because it has a stigma of being hard to use. But multi-factor authentication in the past year, I believe, has really grown to be much easier to deploy and manage on a widespread basis. So there's really no excuse. Certainly consumers have started to adopt it. Businesses should be adopting multi-factor as well.
That's Corey Williams from Centrify. ATM and point-of-sale hacking continues. Police in Thailand have a be-on-the-lookout alert for a 20-something Russian they believe was responsible for draining ATMs in that country of about $350,000, with the use of malware FireEye has called Ripper. The suspect is unnamed. We'll call him for convenience Vanya the Ripper, and he's thought to have had at least 2 accomplices. According to FireEye, Ripper is installed using a malicious EMV chip: insert, install, and steal. Microsoft warns that attackers are exploiting Word vulnerabilities. Weaponized documents are now spreading Cerberus ransomware and password-stealing Trojans through BetaBot. It's a new kind of threat, but it's reminiscent of old-school malicious macros. Adobe patched Cold Fusion with a hotfix Tuesday. Users are advised to apply the patch. The XML external entity injection vulnerability is a real one. Several interesting proof-of-concept attacks indicate a shift toward physical exploitation of hardware. Google researchers showed how a rowhammer attack, exploiting a condition researchers noticed in 2014, can use electromagnetic leakage across rows of transistors to achieve a degree of control over a device. In an excursion into cyber metaphysics, Wired observes that we're accustomed to understanding information systems in metaphorical terms: file, window, memory, etc., but that such newer demonstrations represent a move down and away from metaphorical abstractions. U.S. states continue to worry about and possibly improve voting security. Vermont thinks it's covered, North Carolina wants federal help, and many worry about the implications of federalizing elections. Technology Review thinks that direct manipulation of election results is less likely than most people think, but influencing such results through information operations is a different matter. Russia continues to play an information operations long game with respect to U.S. and other Western elections. It seems to be doing so directly and deniably, as through the Guccifer 2.0 sock puppets, and with the aid of effective fellow travelers. The New York Times observes that, independent as WikiLeaks may be, objectively, as the old Pravda might have put it, Assange's operation is nicely aligned with Russian interests. And finally, we like to keep up with recurring themes. Social media are well known for the disinhibition they induce in their users, and that disinhibition works especially powerfully, it often seems, on those who've run afoul of the law. We've heard of burglars posting their next planned capers on Facebook, of wanted felons responding to notices that a rare Charizard can be found in a police station, of muggers using stolen phones to ask their victims for dates. Today's news in this vein comes from Australia, where a young woman arrested on suspicion of property crimes took it on the lam, allegedly we must say, from a Sydney jail. The police posted a wanted notice, and she politely Facebooked them to ask that they use a more flattering mugshot. She helpfully provided a new picture. There's some closure to the story. She's now back in custody. We hope the magistrate tempers justice with a little bit of mercy. We await further news from the Sydney PD. It's time to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Recorded Future. Recorded Future is the real-time threat intelligence company whose patented technology continuously analyzes the entire web, developing cyber intelligence that gives analysts unmatched insight into emerging threats. At the CyberWire, we subscribe to and profit from Recorded Future's Cyber Daily. As anyone in the industry will tell you, when analytical talent is as scarce as it is today, every enterprise owes it to itself to look into any technology that makes your security teams more productive and your intelligence more comprehensive and timely, because that's what you want, actionable intelligence. Sign up for the Cyber Daily email, and every day you'll receive the top trending indicators Recorded Future captures crossing the web. Cyber news, targeted industries, threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, malware, and suspicious IP addresses. Subscribe today and stay a step or two ahead of the threat. Go to recordedfuture.com/intel to subscribe for free threat intelligence updates. That's recordedfuture.com/intel. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. Joining me is Jonathan Katz. He's a professor of computer science at the University of Maryland, also director of the Maryland Cybersecurity Center. Jonathan saw a story come by this week that Matthew Green, a researcher at Johns Hopkins University, has found some vulnerabilities in Apple's iMessage encryption protocol. What do you make of this discovery?
Well, I think it was quite interesting. Actually, the main attack that they showed was what's called a chosen ciphertext attack, where what that basically considered is a situation where an attacker eavesdrops and gets some ciphertext and can then pose as a legitimate user and send related ciphertext to the server, to the Apple server, and see their decryption. And even though it sounds kind of contrived, this kind of a scenario can occur in practice. And what Green and his collaborators showed was that they were able to use such an attack to actually recover the original encrypted message.
And so part of the point they were making in this article and in this research was that that Apple sort of rolled their own when it came to coming up with this encryption, and that may not be such a good idea.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, it's kind of funny because these chosen ciphertext attacks are something that I give as a course project in my undergraduate cryptography class, and it's sort of well known by now, number one, that these attacks are possible, and number two, how to defend against them. And so it's kind of surprising that Apple engineers weren't aware of this, apparently, when they designed their protocol. And like you said, it's exactly another indication of why people shouldn't roll their own crypto, but should really be using standardized and off-the-shelf sort of protocols.
And so what are the advantages of using standardized and off-the-shelf protocols?
Well, I mean, basically, one of the advantages is, number one, that they have been designed with sort of knowledge of these various attacks, like these chosen ciphertext attacks, and they've been developed to protect against them. And more than that, they've also been analyzed by the community. So they're publicized, they're analyzed, they're constructed in a very careful way in order to be secure. And with Apple, what they did, they actually not only did they roll their own, but they also kept the details of their protocol hidden. So as part of their work, Green and his collaborators had to actually spend a lot of time reverse engineering the protocol just to get it to a point where they could sit down and analyze it. And if Apple had released the details of what they were doing, then these kind of attacks might have been found much earlier, maybe even before they started deploying it. So, those are the advantages you get from relying on things that other people have developed and already studied.
All right, Jonathan Katz, thanks for joining us. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, along with interviews, our glossary, and more, visit thecyberwire.com. Thanks to all of our sponsors who make the CyberWire possible. The CyberWire podcast is produced by Pratt Street Media. The editor is John Petrick. Our social media editor is Jennifer Iben. And our technical editor is Chris Russell. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. And I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.